Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will just wait a couple of minutes while we still get more members joining us. So thank you so much, everybody. We're very excited for this session. Just to kind of introduce myself, I am Fiona and I am the Community Growth Coordinator here at Teacher Horizons, and I'm joined by my colleague and my manager, Kavi. And we are very grateful today to have Lisa joining us, who is an inspiring leader in the international education community. And she has so many amazing insights. So this will be a really informative and very useful session for those of you that are hoping to teach in the Middle East. I've taught in the Middle East myself, so I'm quite excited to hear more about this too, and see if I can help at all. So I'm just going to wait one more minute. We're still getting quite a few more people coming in. And what I would just like to ask for this session, it would be amazing if you could keep your cameras on just so that we can see your faces if possible. And please make sure to keep yourselves on mute. Later on in the session, we'll have a little Q&A, so maybe there might be some opportunities to take microphones off, but we will let you know about that. So please, in the meantime, just make sure that you keep yourselves on mute so that we're not interrupting and we can follow the session nice and easily. And I think we've got most of the people in now. We've still got a few more coming in, but I will hand over to Lisa now so that she can introduce herself and start leading the session. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for having me on this webinar. My name is Lisa Grace Wilson. I've been in this region for 14 going on 15 years. So I came out here in 2010 as a part of a group that was sent out here by North Anglia Education to work in the education reform in Abu Dhabi, and I haven't left, and they haven't kicked me out. So that's a good thing. So what we're going to be doing in this session is really to talk about the things I've learned over the years teaching in this region. So I'm a former teacher, taught in London, taught in Enfield, taught in Haringey, grew up most of my life in North London, and then I became a school leader in the UK, senior leader, and then came out here where I worked as an advisor with the government, worked as a principal out here as well, leading Al Shaheen School for several years in Al Ain, Abu Dhabi. So if there's anybody on the call who recognizes my face from those days, hello. And then in 2018, I kind of segued out of school leadership and more into journalism in the field of education as the editorial director of Teach Middle East magazine and schoolfinder.ae. I'm still based here in Abu Dhabi. And now I do more content creation, writing, and I also host the Teach Middle East podcast. So if you ever want to listen to what's happening in the space or some of the interesting people that we talk to, then the Teach Middle East podcast, I host it and it is available on all the major podcast platforms, including YouTube. And then I also write a newsletter on LinkedIn called the Education Roundup Middle East, which you can check out if you follow me on LinkedIn, just my full name, Lisa Grace Wilson. And so at the end of this session, I will put this slide back up for people who want to find me. Sorry, I don't have a link to my profile. Maybe that can be done later on. But I think to start the session off, I would love for you to just jump in the chat real quick and just tell us why you're on this session today. So why did you want to tune into this webinar? Just a sentence so I can see where people's heads are at and why they're on this call and what they hope to gain from it. So if you don't mind, if you could just jump in the chat and Yeah, I see some people writing. I want to discover a new place and culture, which is always great. Um, and so if you put any curious about teaching in UAE, would like to hear more. So yeah, so that's perfect. Now I'm going to talk about the UAE, but I'm also going to be talking about the wider Middle East, GCC really, not the whole Middle East, because Middle East is quite big. Um, so people are saying they're thinking of moving. Somebody says, I'm moving to Dubai in August. So you like to prepare yourself. Amazing. Welcome. I'm thinking of moving from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. And we're going to talk about that in a minute because Southeast Asia is an interesting place and people are literally moving the other way. But anyway, moving to Saudi Arabia in August. So that's fabulous. Okay, brilliant. So I get a sense it's a mix of curiosity as well as wanting to kind of explore what this region has to offer. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you that this region is exciting. There's a lot happening. I mean, when has it not been exciting? I think from 2015 onwards, this region has become like a super exciting place for people to work and live. And gone are the days when it used to be like people would come for a year or two and they would just leave. Right now, people spending, like myself, over a decade here, growing old here, raising families here, buying properties here, settling down. So it's become a more settled place. And with that comes advantages and disadvantages, which we will go into. So thank you. I see all of the things coming in, and people can read them and we can look at them a little bit later. Now, moving right along, when we talk about moving to this region, we have to remember a couple of things. One, that building your career here, there are requirements. So these are the things that you will see maybe on many job adverts, competitive salary packages. You'll see what the required qualifications are. And then they'll talk about cultural considerations, which obviously are all important. But I didn't put these on the slide because I want to go kind of off record. When you are looking at moving out here, let's start with salary expectations. Salary expectations vary widely. And when I say widely, I mean very, very widely. You will find schools that will pay you, I'm going to say them in pounds, £1,500 all in. And when I say all in, I mean they will not give you anything else. They won't give you accommodation. They won't give you medical, etc., etc. And then you will find schools that will pay you far more than that monthly, which we'll talk about later on. And they will give you accommodation, they will give you health insurance, they will give you a flight home every year. So when you are looking for a position out here, salary expectations are so wide and varied that you have to really be careful what you're signing up for. When it comes to qualifications out here, they mostly require bachelor's degree in education or in your area of specialty alongside your postgraduate certification or your teaching license. And that varies if it's American or British. Now, I put cultural considerations here, but we can talk about that as we move further. What I meant when I talked about salary, I put it in pounds because I thought, well, maybe most of you here are tuning in from England. I'm not quite sure. I just assumed that. I could be wrong. And I didn't ask where you were tuning in from. Maybe that should have probably been one of my first questions. But I put it in pounds. Maybe you can do some translation in dollars. Good schools will pay you upwards of £40,000 a year, tax free. And tax free is where the difference lies. Because when you're coming, I can only speak from England, so I don't know American taxes. It's significant, the taxes in England. And so if you're getting a tax-free salary, you should be able to do quite a bit with it. But there's a big but. If that salary does not include your benefits, if that salary includes all of your benefits, be very careful. Housing in Doha, Dubai, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Muscat, I'm not quite sure about, but those four cities that I mentioned are very expensive. And especially Dubai, they're getting more and more expensive all the time. And so if a school says to you, we do not provide accommodation, and they're giving you a salary of anything under £50,000, it's not going to be a good look. You're going to struggle because of the cost of housing. And it's not alone the housing, it's the utilities, not so much, but transport. Food is also quite expensive. And if they're not giving you a flight, prices of tickets to go home are also very expensive. So I think one of the things you have to do is when you're getting these packages is to check what the other benefits are that they're offering you. Most good schools will offer you a tax-free salary, housing allowance, annual tickets, and health insurance. If schools are not willing to offer you that, be quite wary of accepting that because you might find yourself out of pocket. Any questions on that so far, or just hold them maybe until the Q&A section. Then there are no pensions here. So saving for your long term is your responsibility, which therefore means that your end of service that you get will not be sufficient, because normally the end of service is 1 month of your salary excluding benefits. So this is what happens. Let's say your salary is £50,000 a year. They divide that into two. So they will call maybe 20,000 or 25,000 salary, and then they'll call the other 25 or 30,000, depends on how they split it, benefits. When it's the end of your contract, your end of service, you are only going to get 1 month's salary from the base pay, not the allowances. And so you might think the gratuity is a lot and you will do your 2, 3, 4, 5-year contract and not save anything for pension and be very, very surprised at the end that, oh, what I got is so small for end of service that it won't make a dent in your long-term savings. So in order to help with that, you need to be putting aside what you would have normally been putting aside in your home country, either in a private pension or an investment account of some kind. I'm not like an investment bank or anything to give you where to put it. However, you have to ensure that you're doing that because the schools, they bear no responsibility for your long-term savings. And unfortunately, a lot of people who come out here neglect the long-term savings that they need to have. And so they end up leaving with very little by way of pension savings. Yeah. So I just want to hammer that home that when you're looking at your package, you have to have enough wiggle room in there for savings, both for your short-term goals, medium-term goals, and your long-term goals, because the schools will bear no responsibility for any of that. So, what is a good salary in the UAE? You might ask. A good salary in the UAE is anywhere between, and this is classroom teacher, not school management, not anything on the management scale, between 14 and 18,000. But those should be in dirhams, not pounds, dirhams. I don't know how to put that in pounds. So between 14 to about 18,000 for a classroom teacher is a good salary. On top of that, you want to be getting your housing, you want to be getting your medical, and you want to be getting your travel in terms of one ticket home. Now let's talk about families. The salary I just told you is good if you are single or a couple. Now, when you have children, education allowance here is vital because the cost of private schools are extremely high in most cases for a teacher's salary. The average cost of a good British curriculum school, as in school fees, is 45 to 65,000 dirhams a year, which comes out to somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000 pounds a year. So you can just think of that in terms of multiples of children. So if you have more than one child, for example, you have to ensure that your package includes free school places. Now, here's what's happening. Many schools are trying to save money, so they're not giving more than one child place free. And then they might give you the second one on a discount, or they might tell you straight up, we only give one child space. The other thing to be aware of is whether or not your school, if you are a family, whether or not they're going to be willing to give you accommodation that is family based, because many of them will give you a one bed flat and that's not good enough for a family. So you need to now think about whether or not they're going to be able to give you an allowance or a large enough accommodation that will accommodate your family. The other thing for people with families is to think about the medical insurance and the travel for your family, because not many schools will give you a family package that includes medical insurance for your children and your spouse, and also travel tickets for them. So that's something you'll also have to budget for from your salary. So these are the considerations that you have to bear in mind when you're moving. The UAE does tend to pay a little bit less than somewhere like, for example, Saudi Arabia. But that's also changing as well. Now Saudi Arabia is also trying to not be as lucrative, but it's still more lucrative than the UAE in certain aspects because it's still considered, quote unquote, a hardship placement, if you understand what I mean, meaning that not as many people want to go to Saudi. However, that is also changing. So the landscape here is truly dynamic. Now, when we talk about Qatar, Qatar can have more attractive packages than the UAE, but not much more attractive, if you see what I mean. It's not, it varies from school to school. The thing to think about with Qatar as well is that they tend, in my experience, to favor younger teachers. For some reason, they want them as young as possible. And so you end up having, I don't know, less opportunities if you are, say, in my sort of age group, which is the 40s and 50s. Oh, there is one thing, as I talk about age, the more experienced you are, is the more you will demand in terms of pay, right? But as you get older, as if you closer to 60, your chances of employment decreases by, I would say, 80 odd percent. Very, very few schools will hire you over the age of 55, 56. They just won't. I don't know what it is. We could call it ageism and we could call it what we want, but regionally, they just simply, I don't know where they get it from, but it's like you expire at 60. It's just crazy to me, which gives me a very close expiration date, which kind of worries me a bit. But it is a matter of kind of looking where you are in your career, because some people are saying, oh, they're exploring. Now, who is this region really good for in terms of building your career? I would say it's really good for the energetic, young, vibrant teacher who really wants to explore, travel, and get their feet wet in the international market. That's just how I feel personally. Others may disagree with me on that one in the chat, and I'm open to that. The other thing I also have noticed with this region is that when it comes to teaching couples, they favor that because it's like two for the price of one. Even though you get your two separate salaries, you do tend to share accommodation, share benefits. And so teaching couples tend to do fairly well if they can find a school that needs both their expertise at the same time. Now, when we talk about expertise, they do want you to have your bachelor's degree. They do love master's degrees over here. They love PhDs, even though they're not going to pay you for your PhD, but they do like to have it that they've got a doctor so and so on staff. So if you've got those qualifications, by all means. But you also have to have your teaching license. If you are teaching in any private school regionally, you have to be a qualified teacher, as in you have to have gotten your QTS or your certification if you're coming from the States or other parts of Europe. They will not take you with CELTA and Delta in K to 12 schools as a qualification. It won't happen. They do have a preference for people who have had 2 or more years of experience. So I would say 1 to 4 years. Because when you start going into the 5 and 10 and 15 years of experience, they don't want to pay for that either. So there is like a mix there. And this is a generalization, of course. There are schools that do look for experienced staff. Those tend to be not for profit or promoted roles. So your heads of departments, middle leaders, senior leaders, etc. Here, the curriculum that is most popular in this region is the British curriculum, followed by the American curriculum, and followed by the IB. But of course, there is a plethora of curriculum. There's Russian, there's Spanish, Italian, there's French, there's government as well, which is something we will talk about when we get further down in the slides. And then in terms of language institutes, let's say you are not a qualified teacher, but you want to teach in a language institute. The language institutes do take CELTA and Delta and TESOL, but they tend to pay less and cater to more adult learners. So they're outside of the K to 12 band, and they're more institutes that are based on maybe upskilling adults who are trying to get into the workplace. And that is something that you can look at if you don't have the teaching qualifications. Cultural considerations, it's a Muslim region. So all the respect for the local customs and dress codes are required, but you don't have to dress that way. In Saudi Arabia, it's a little bit more conservative, and so you do have to cover all the way down to your wrist and down to your knees or below your knees, if for example. In the UAE, that is still expected, but it's not as strict. In Qatar, it is also expected, might be a little bit less strict in the international private schools. They might be a little bit more flex. Open-toed shoes are not always acceptable. Some schools relax that and allow you to wear open-toe sandals. Some schools are quite strict. For men, some schools require you to wear a tie, shirt and tie. Some schools are a little bit more relaxed. And in recent years, it's funny because when I came out here in 2010, nearly all the schools required men to wear a tie. Some even required a suit in this heat, in the furnace out here. But for some reason, as the years have gone by, which I think is a good thing, they've relaxed that. So some will ask for a button-down shirt and with a tie, some without a tie. And the dress codes, they vary, depends. Some schools, even though they follow the British curriculum, if they're serving a local population, they will not allow mixed genders past a certain age. So be prepared for the school to be segregated at a certain stage where you are only either teaching only girls or you're teaching only boys. And that in itself presents a whole different set of challenges or opportunities, if you want to call them that. But then you also have the international private schools that are, integrated, gender mixed all the way through from K through to 13. And then here I put different communication styles with parents because unlike the UK, for example, out here, email is not king. WhatsApp is king and queen. So you're gonna find that you have WhatsApp for classes, WhatsApp for year groups. Parents are gonna WhatsApp you at some really unknown hours of night. You don't have to respond. Most schools put a little bit of a ring fence around that. But communication, even though they've got newsletters, they've got loads of different tools to use, people still want WhatsApp. People still prefer WhatsApp. And you find that they'll kick off in the WhatsApp group sometimes. It's just the way it is. I have two children and they go to school here, and my kids' school have banned WhatsApp groups, and still behind the school's back, the parents have still formed WhatsApp groups. So you can understand where the place of WhatsApp is here. Because it's mostly private schools, it's not like government schools in the US or UK. Parents think they have a right to communicate with you at any time. And so if the school isn't strict about parental communication, you are going to probably get a lot of you're going to probably get a lot of communications at odd hours. You don't necessarily, you need to just check in with your school what the expectations are around whether or not you need to answer them, or you should or shouldn't answer them, and when, what hours you should. And if you have questions around that, just save them till the end. Understanding the Islamic calendar is super important. Understanding the periods where certain holidays are, or certain holy days are being observed, and what the customs are around that is super important. You can't bring certain foods into school. No pork. I can just let you know straight. You are not allowed to bring any pork into the schools, whether it's an international school or not. That's no, because you will offend the local culture. There are times like Ramadan when there's fasting, and you should really be respectful. I've watched the full shift of this. When we came, everything used to shut and no restaurants would be open during the daytime. No one is allowed to eat on the streets, eat in public areas. But that's shifted in the UAE a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. But Oman still has strict rules. Saudi Arabia still has very strict rules. So does Qatar. So does Kuwait. So just to be aware, if you're coming out here during the holy month of Ramadan, you will have to adjust the way you operate. And then there are things around the Eid festivals. You might get invited to, maybe iftars or to breaking of the fast and things like that. It's good to take part in these things. It shows an acceptance and an embrace of the culture in which you are now operating. So that's it. Now, I put varied classroom management expectations here because discipline in schools also varies. It is not always a bed of roses. And because the parents pay, the level of discipline that you give, not level, how do I say this? The style of discipline, you'll have to really work on that. So I don't know, in England, there might be lots of sanctions and exclusions, and that is not a thing so much here. You might have to work a lot closer with the parents, involving the senior leaders, a lot more meetings about discipline, finding other positive ways of disciplining, um, having parents really review the policies of the school, and adhere to that. So it's almost as if you are rethinking the way you manage your classes. And then I have to be honest, the kids here tend to be better, but they tend to be a lot more chatty. And so as much as you might use certain classroom management techniques like sending kids outside, or I don't know what people do, but just be careful here because it's a different environment. It's a different way of operating, and you don't want to offend or upset the people you're serving. And as much as they are students in this private school world, they are your clients as well, and the parents are your clients. It's such a fine line. Now, what's the good parts of this? The good parts is that because it's private, they are more motivated a lot of the times, and the parents are a lot more on board because they're paying top dollars, right? So they want the kids to really excel and to succeed. So you'll get a lot more buy-in from the parents, a lot more partnerships, a lot more inquiries about how is my child doing and what can I do to support, and do you think they need an extra this or an extra that or a tutor or this or that. And so you will get a lot more interest and a lot more involvement from the parents. So that's good. And also parents tend to really respect what the teacher says a lot more than in other places, I find, and this could be different for different people, but I found when I used to be a principal, if I said to a parent, I think you need to work on this with your child, I get a yes, miss, and I get a feedback sometimes. Yes, we tried this, it worked, or thank you, or we tried this, it didn't work. Do you have any other suggestions? And so there's a nicer air of collaboration between the teachers and the parents here. All right, so we talked a lot about the qualifications. Now, how do you have your application stand out? Because when you're applying in this region, for every job, there is a whole lot of applications. Now, to let yours stand out, you really have to highlight any kind of experience or exposure that you have that makes you a good fit for the international schools market. You don't need to read these. These were just brainstorm ideas. But think about yourself and what you bring. And as we are in the age of AI, be very careful not to just do an AI CV and send it in, because people are getting a lot of that. So almost kind of like think outside of the box. And as we go further down in the slides, I'll talk about how you can stand out. Professional development is huge in this region. Sorry, I think I clicked that premature. It's huge in this region. So they want to see how you have been developing yourself. What certifications have you been getting? So where I told you that TESOL and CELTA and Delta are not going to get you in the school, but if you are teaching English, because there's so many second language learners here, predominantly second language learners in most schools, having these extra qualifications will actually be good for you if you're teaching languages, because they want to know that you're able to help their they're learners, they're second language learners. What other qualifications? Your NPQHs and your NPQSL, NPQ, all the NPQs are good here. Anything now in terms of AI certification is going to also let you stand out. All the tech, Apple certified teacher, Microsoft teacher, all these things help on your CV. Speaking at conferences, putting what you're specialist in, all of those things help because it's a crowded marketplace for people wanting to enter this region. I remember someone in the chat was saying that they're coming in from Southeast Asia, but I think I've noticed recently that not a lot of, but there are quite a few people who are moving to Southeast Asia after having taught here in the Middle East. And the reason is the cost of living in that part of the world is lower, and so people get a lot more for saving, so they can live and save. Whereas here, if your package isn't really good, like I told you earlier, your ability to save is hampered, which then in the long term is a problem for you. Let's keep going. So I thought of breaking down kind of some of the things that are going on regionally. In terms of international schools, we spoke about this before in pounds, but this is what it kind of looks like in dollars. If you get into the good international schools, governments here are now hiring. So you do have governments that are hiring teachers. You can work directly for the Ministry of Education in many of the countries. And then these are like smaller institutions in Oman or Bahrain. They're kind of like lower salary scales. The problem with these as well is you don't really get, for these private academies, be very careful because they might not give you any kind of end of service benefits, nor do they give you accommodation. The stipend doesn't really cover a comfortable place for you to live. So just be wary of those things. Let's see, I might have touched on this. Yes, I did. Okay. Now, day-to-day classroom realities. It is a very multicultural region, very, very much a microcosm of the world in which we live. And so you have to be able to have very inclusive approaches, making sure that your books, your materials reflect the varying backgrounds of the students that you are teaching. Also, thinking about different strategies, thinking about different ways of approaching the students, because you will find as well, for example, there's a conflict in Ukraine, a war with Russia and Ukraine, right? But a lot of students have come from both Russia and Ukraine to the UAE, and they're in the same classrooms. Now, as a teacher, you have to make sure you find a way to navigate that with sensitivity. There might be students who are in your classroom who've been displaced from maybe Palestine. How do you navigate that? So it's just about having your cultural antennas really attuned to what's going on and being able to navigate that with sensitivity. The other thing you have to know is in international schools, there is very, very rarely do you have setting. And what I mean by setting is ability setting. Yeah. So you will be teaching the full spectrum in one class. And you might find that you have to cater a lot more than you would maybe at home to students who are just learning English in the same classroom with a native speaker, in the same classroom with a student who came from a whole different curriculum and a whole different system to a new curriculum and a new system. So the agility that you're going to need to act on your feet and really work is so important. And then talking about blending your approaches from, traditional, there's some schools that are heavy on tech. So if you're coming from a system where you don't have a lot of tech and you get into a system where everybody has to be an Apple teacher like that, you're going to have to really work on your methodology, and you'll end up spending a lot of time upskilling yourself. But it's all worth it, because as soon as you get embedded in the international space, you can move from country to country, from school to school. It's an exciting space to be in. Promotions are a lot readily available, because what happens is they want to promote people, generally speaking, there are exceptions, but most schools want to promote people who have experience within the region, because it eliminates some of the friction. And once you have that cultural understanding and that contextual experience, you find that you're more able to handle the things that are thrown at you on a daily basis. And then we spoke a little bit about balancing traditional values and innovation. Communication, we talked about that. Respecting the hierarchical structures. You do find here, because you're dealing with leaders, that's another thing. Because you're dealing with leaders from all over the world, maybe in England, you call your leader by their first name, you guys are buddies, you might have a drink on the weekend at the pub, blah, 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 blah. Here, some schools, it's a Mr. or a Miss, and there's like a very clear hierarchical structure there. Other schools, it's quite, flat. So it's just to be very kind of aware of where you land when you get over here. All right, I think I've got 3 more minutes and then we'll start taking some questions. We talked about that. Now, my final slide, I've skipped over this whole thing of classroom management, is because I think we've dealt with that. Where do you find the opportunities? Because that's where a lot of us are struggling. The opportunities are on the websites of the schools. They're also on TES. Sorry, I want to skip through a couple of slides to get to somewhere else. Just 1 second. Yeah, here we are. So they're on TES, and they're, they're on TES, and they are also on different websites, Search Associates. I'm not advertising them, but what I'm saying is you can check the jobs boards, Teacherhorizons, all the different ones, okay? There are also recruitment fairs in different places, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar, Bangkok, all over the world. School websites and networks. But hear me clearly. These are for everyone. If you really are trying to get into specific schools, then your best bet is to find someone who currently works in that school, either on LinkedIn or through someone who knows someone who knows someone, and find out what the vacancies are and how you can apply directly. It cuts out a lot of the red tape and the fluff, or you getting lost in the sauce. I think look for things like opportunities to connect with people on virtual events or in conferences or wherever you can tap someone on the shoulder and say, what are the vacancies in your school? And then if you are a person who isn't shy to drop in someone's direct message and say, hey, I'm looking, and you're not going to get bruised by the fact that they didn't answer. You look for someone else and ask someone else and keep at it. You stand a lot more chance than someone who's going to go through the test or something. And if you can, find those schools that are doing recruitment fairs. I would say attend those because you'll stand a big chance of meeting someone from the school that you could strike a rapport with and get some insights into how to apply. All right, we're at the good point. Thank you so much for listening to me for such a long time. Now we can have some Q&A, um, and maybe get into some of the nitty-gritty of what you would like to learn specifically about this region. So I'm just going to put my face slide back on the screen, pardon me, and then we can get into some Q&A on what is it that you would like to learn about this market that wasn't covered. So I don't know, Ravi, do they put it in the chat or?
Yeah, I think either way, if you're open to both ways, they can write on chat, or if someone wants to just unmute themselves and ask the question, I think they can feel free to do that too.
Okay, awesome. So either way, please feel free. We've got maybe about 10 minutes or so. Okay, someone
So,
says, as a literature
yeah.
teacher, I'm curious about how much freedom teachers have in terms of choosing texts. So if you are not teaching the exam years, funny you ask that because I am a teacher of literature and language. Um, if you're not teaching the exam years, you have quite a lot of flexibility. And that's why I talk about choosing things that are culturally appropriate and represents all the different students. You can. When it gets up to the exam years, IGCSE years, A levels, a lot of the text gets prescribed, but you can still throw in some supplementary texts in there to, beef it up. Okay, hope that helps. Okay, so they're coming in thick and fast now. Are there opportunities to be an EAL specialist and not have to be a class teacher? Yes, there are, but Kath, they still want you to have your teaching qualifications. You can't come with CELTA and Delta only. What they want is that you have CELTA or Delta, but you're also having your PGCE and your QTS if you're from England, or your license if you're from the States. Yeah, they want both. Someone says, I'd be 52, 53 when applying. Is it game over? I'm already too old. 52. It's not game over, it's just a little harder. So you have to now be coming with some real specialist skills. It's unfortunate. Like I told you, I don't understand the rationale behind it. You know what I mean, Keely? But it's a situation where they want to look at how long I don't even know if how long you have left. That sounds really weird, as if you're about to expire. But 52 is still okay. 52, 53 is still okay. I would say throw your hat in the ring, see what they say. But I would go for, hopefully you're a specialist at something. To be honest, Keely, if you teach physics or math, they'll take you even if you have a walking stick, I swear. There is such a shortage. Okay. What hours are schools open and lessons start in primary school? Do they start earlier because of the heat? Yes. So Kathy, they start really early. My kids have to be in school by 7:45 in the morning, and they are there until 2:45, and then they get on the bus and get home by 2:30. So schools tend to be a lot earlier here. The hours tend to be longer because here in the UAE, it's a 4.5 work week in most Emirates. And in Sharjah, it's a 4.5 day work week in all the Emirates except Sharjah, because Sharjah is a 4-day work week. And then also remember, in Qatar and Saudi, your weekday starts on Sunday and ends on Thursday, and your weekend is Saturday, Friday and Saturday. In Qatar, in Saudi, and Kuwait, and in Oman. In the UAE, we are on a Saturday, Sunday weekend, but you end half day on a Friday for most Emirates, and For Sharjah, you don't have school on Friday. You only work 4 days, but it's 4 long days, child. Other than the money, why are teachers moving to Southeast Asia? I'm in Southeast Asia and looking to move. It's also change of pace. UAE and the GCC is such a high-paced, fast-developing region that you will work hard here. You might work less hard than maybe in the UK or US, and that all depends on school to school. But I think people are trying to move there for lifestyle, and also people just want change, really. If they've been in the Middle East, they just think, "Oh, maybe I want to move to Southeast Asia, see something different, do something different." Plus, the rain falls in Southeast Asia, which is really a good thing, I'm telling you. Green and less skyscrapers sometimes. You might just want to hug a tree. You want to hug a tree, you move to Thailand. That's how I feel about that. But I think it's just horses for courses. People just want to change. I've been working in Latin America for 7 years. I'm moving for improved security. What do you mean? Like less crime? Increased pay. My Ecuadorian partner should also have more job opportunities and security. Now, in terms of Latin America, I don't know too much about that side, but I will tell you the GCC is a very, very safe region. Maybe one of the reasons why I've been here for over a decade is because I don't have to lock my door and I don't have to lock my car. I should, because it's not heaven, but I don't, because it's that safe. In terms of job security, I can't speak to that. And the reason is it varies from school to school. Some schools you will feel nice and secure. Some schools are quite temperamental and you'll end up not feeling comfortable until you end up changing. So it's not as secure as you think. Someone says, I have a PGC in English. Oh, okay, Kath, you're good. You're good. So you could go in and do some EAL work there. Would also be good if you have some TESOL or CELTA or Delta with it. As a dance teacher, what are my opportunities to work there? I'm from India. So I know one Indian dance teacher, and I don't think there are so many opportunities for Indian dance teachers unless you're going to an Indian curriculum school that has that specialism. What is the expected qualification for being a math teacher there in the Middle East? So for being a math teacher, you either have a degree in mathematics plus your postgraduate certificate of education, or you have a bachelor's of education degree with a specialism in mathematics. So either of the two would help. Is the pay for all teachers equal, or can it depend on the subject? It's not the subject that's the problem, it's the passport. So the pay for all teachers is equal, yet it isn't. So geography teacher, biology, English, math, whatever, you get the same pay, but that's not where the disparity comes in. The disparity comes in based on your passport. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Is it possible to have part-time jobs? No. Yes and no. Yes, if you can find a school that will allow you to work on your own visa. So for example, I'm the wife to someone who has a job outside of education. They have sponsored me. I have my own visa. I can work. I only want to work part-time. A school might be able to say, yes, you can work with us. You already have all your benefits and visa sorted. But if you're coming and you expect the school to sponsor you, not on a part-time basis. They will want you to be full-time. Are there any external agencies support child protections? Yes, there are. There are businesses who do that here, and then they are contracted by the school. Do we have less chance if we have kids? It never used to be that way, but the truth is you do, because schools are tending to want to spend less money. And because when you have kids, you will take up a space and you probably need bigger accommodation and all of those types of things. The truth is they are not looking to spend more. So, but here's the good thing. if you are a very qualified person in a subject area that is very much needed and you have kids, schools will still consider you quite rightly so. So it's, I mean, I guess roll your dice, see where you land. What advice can you give a kindergarten homeroom teacher? I think my advice to a kindergarten homeroom teacher is apply, be flexible, and see if if it's for you. None of this is written in stone. Sorry, a lot of it has to do with whether or not you're willing to try. All right, I've got four more minutes. I've had a bad experience in the Middle East, Qatar, with one of the international schools due to toxic management. How can I deal with that when I'm going back into teaching abroad? Well, that's a hard question for me to answer. I think you just have to really do your research on the school, make sure you don't end up in that situation again. Everywhere in the world, you'll have some really toxic managers, toxic environments. It's just for you to really think about whether or not the environment works for you. And if you find yourself in that, it's a way to preserve yourself and get out of it as fast as you possibly can. I have a British Columbia teaching certificate. Does this certification make sense on my application and salary? I'm a maths teacher. Is that British Columbia, Canada, with more than 23 years experience and leadership experience, and I have a PhD? How much do you think is my possible salary? I couldn't answer that. That would be giving you false information. But I think if you are this qualified, you'd be at the top of the scale. So whatever that school's scale is, you'll be really at the top of it. And because you're mathematics, I think you stand a really good chance, to be honest. You stand a very good chance. I'm a psychologist working as a primary counselor. Are there particular qualifications schools in the Middle East look for? No, if you're a psychologist and you're working in England, or if you're on the international schools market and you're working in a very good international school, I think it transfers very well across. Is the PGCI. So this one is tricky. It does if you can get your QTS done in a British overseas certified school. So that is the clincher with that. You can get the PGCI, it's fine, but you need to now get your QTS from a BSO school. And there are a few, but it's about getting into them, Sabrin. So that's the problem there. Somebody says, and French. Don't really know what that means. I'm a science teacher and have an MPQSL, so maybe I have a chance. Yeah, you probably do. Especially if you sharpen up your physics. I'm telling you, physics is such a shortage area. Any more question? I presume that teaching primary is less pressure than teaching secondary. I mean, it depends on what you love, what you enjoy. If you put me in a primary school, I feel pressure. If you put me in a secondary school, even when the kids are lippy and giving me attitude, I'll feel less pressure than having them cry because I looked at them funny. See? So it really just depends on what the pressure is that you like and what you don't like. I think that is it. Oh, let's say you spoke about licensing in a nutshell. What does the process for someone coming from the Caribbean without any kind of licensing? Now that is the issue. So if you are coming from the Caribbean, you do have your licensing. Your diploma from, if you're coming, say, for example, from Jamaica, your diploma from your teacher's college is your license. And once you have that with your degree, you can get into schools here. There are many teachers who've come from Jamaica. I can't speak for other countries. I'm Jamaican, so I can speak from that background, even though I'm British. I was born in Jamaica. You can get directly into schools with your Jamaican qualifications. So are there any specific platforms, programs, or networks I should explore for growth and transition in this field? There are many platforms. If you're particularly interested in the Middle East, follow Teach Middle East. They're on all socials. And I think just keep abreast on all the different people in the region who are on LinkedIn, see what they're saying, see what they're talking about. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much. You've been really, really brilliant. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for remaining with us and for being active. If you want to connect with me, you can do so on LinkedIn. Just search my name and just, follow, or if you want, you can scroll down and hit connect. If you want to send me a message, if you've got further questions, I'm happy to answer them there. But that's the end for me. Let me hand over to the Teacher Horizon guys.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We're super grateful that you joined us today and shared these valuable insights. And also, we saw some great questions. Thanks for answering all the questions as well. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us today at the Teacher Horizons Community Connect webinar. We hope you found it useful. One thing to note is we'll send a follow-up email after this as well. And we can share, if Lisa allows, as you said, her LinkedIn profile link, and some other links and resources and information, plus a feedback survey as well. So it'll be great if you can fill that in. Once again, thanks a lot, Lisa. This was very insightful, and we appreciate you sharing your time and your knowledge and insights. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of the day, night, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today.